Who is Alan Castle?
Who is Alan Castle? Okay, is it recording?
Oh yeah, it's been recording.
Okay. Right. Who am I? I am a 52-year-old man who has been in business for 33 years, I've said. Where do we start? I'm probably too tired to answer this, actually. This interview shouldn't have been done today. So 33 years of being a businessman, 16 years of being a bum, 17 years of being a bum, and the rest of that time has been hard work. So who am I? I'm a culmination of 33 years, 34 years of hard work and determination. That's who I am. I'm an addict to work. I can't sleep at night. I find it hard to do a full day. So that's who I am. I find it hard to do a full day of doing nothing. You have to cut that already, for frig's sake. So where did I start? So Alan Castle. So I'm a rags to riches story, which is a horrific journey, I think. It's one of the worst journeys any man can take, is being the glory and then failing from said glory, and then having to rebuild it to prove that I'm not just a flash in the pan. So my whole life has been about building up my career and then going absolutely loony. Back to a bum. I think I still am a bum. Remember now. So again, who is Alan Castle? A little boy who grew up in an estate in London, a very poor area, by the way. So a lot of people would think that I had a privileged upbringing. I genuinely didn't. In fact, I had one of the worst upbringing in anyone's life, and I've revealed it to friends and family. But this will be the first time that I'm actually going to reveal it fully to the viewers. Ultimately, this is going to be a conversation about who I am, what I became, or what I grew up from, and what I became and what I ended up like. So where I am sitting today, right now, is a consequence of every action and reaction that I've made over the last 52 years of my life. I'm sitting here right now talking to you as a consequence of that. Is that not true?
It is, yeah.
So that's who is Alan Castle. So
we'll go kind of from the start. What are you more into your upbringing and family life? What it was like growing up in England? Family, friends, the houses you were in, your early days of work, education, school, kind of early life over in England.
Sure, I'll start with when I was young. So I was brought up in an estate in London, Feltham, it's called. It's not a good place to live. It would be known as Little Pakistan, or Spot the White Kid. I was brought up in a very multi-ethnic family. My half of my sister, she's black, so we were multi-ethnic. Brought up in an environment where race was never a concern, and religion was never even an issue. We never knew anything about race or religion. We just knew it as the change of people's skin. But it was very poor where I lived, very poor. So we shared one thing in that whole estate. We were all skint. Laughably, my brother referred to us as the 1970s chavs. So we used to go around with skinheads and Fred Perry t-shirts. Maybe they were fake. I don't know if there was such thing as fake Fred Perrys then. But no, actually, Fred Perrys were really cheap. That's why they were so famous, because anyone who was anyone could afford them. So we used to go around in some Fred Perry t-shirts and what they referred to as tonic trousers, where the mods and the skins used to live together or fight together down the local precinct of the shopping area. But as a person who grew up, I grew up without my father. My father lived there in Feltham for about 6 years. He had an affair, and the marriage broke down, which led to a major family trauma. My dad just abandoned us, and I'm not the only person that's had that consequence, but it formed my young child ability of being an entrepreneur. The trauma that I had as a child was the thing that measured me, the thing that made me want to do something constructive to try and stop the pain of not having my father around me. So that was a hard time. So what I did was, age 7, I'll skip ahead a bit more because I want to tell you about the 6-7 scenario. So my dad left me when I was 5, left us when I was 5. And I say left me, he didn't leave just my mum, he left me. And they didn't get on. My mother and my father didn't get on, clearly so. But my father abandoned every one of us. He abandoned, my brother and me, who were his full children. And he denied all acceptance or knowledge or even care for us as a young up-and-coming family. So I had to get my relationship elsewhere and try to form my behaviour on something I enjoyed. And I found that very quickly by going down to the skips to the area. So at the age of 6, I found a new love, 7, and I started going down to the skips and taking bikes from the scrap yards, bikes that were totally destroyed because I couldn't afford a bike. Having a bike for Christmas was something that we never had the privilege of. And all these other kids were driving around and riding around on bikes like the rallies and their. So I made the decision to take bits of old bikes and put them together. And I learned very quickly how to get something I needed for myself was to take other people's crap and put it together and fix it up, spit and shine. And I learned at a very early age how to mechanically repair bikes. Didn't have the money for things like, a puncture repair kit. And I remember my father visiting me one day, it was on my birthday. He walked down to the shopping precinct in Feltham and he went into a shop, and it was the first time I was inside the bike shop and smelling the mechanics of a bike shop and the rubber of the tires, beautiful smells in the shop. And my dad bought me a puncture repair kit, and I adorned that puncture repair kit in a little tiny tin with the little tiny rubbers for me to do repairs. I had that many rubbers on it. As a child, I learnt to actually charge 20 pence to fix other kids' tires, and really quickly. There used to be bike gangs going around and they used to park their bikes at what I referred to as a shed. It wasn't a shed, it was known as a lock-up unit in the back of the flats where we lived. I didn't live in a house. I lived on the 7th floor of these high tower buildings, still there. It's called Hunter House. If anyone lives in Feltham, you know where Hunter House is. Now it's got all these plastic covers on it, the ones that, the Grenfell plastic covers on it. But before, it used to be just thin concrete block. That's all it was, one skin concrete block. I remember the damp on the inside. But anyway, I go back to the story of the bikes. So I found this cupboard outside. There were like lines of little sheds, concrete sheds, and one of the doors were broken. So the council owned it and they rent it as an extra surcharge. If you were a tenant, a housing executive tenant, you didn't just get, or a council tenant, you didn't just get that, you had to rent that for an extra maybe £2 a week. But I managed to get in and I used it as my bike shed. And everyone used to park their bikes there, and I used to fix their tires for them, or fix their chains for them, or fix their brakes for them. And I just knew how to make it work. I used to pretend that I could make their bikes go faster. And I got money for it. And at an age of 7, 8, and 9, I was doing quite well. So I used to always regularly go down to the scrapyard to get more stuff. I ended up tinkering with loads of crap in the shed. And then just one day I just abandoned it because my mother decided that we were going to go and live in Northern Ireland. So at the age of 11, she pulled me out and brought me to Northern Ireland.
Why did you want to go to Northern Ireland from London?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, actually, and that's where I was going to go back to the 6, 7-year-old. So when my father left me, my family and we had a lot of trouble in our family. My mum brought trouble to us. She wasn't the smartest. She isn't the smartest sometimes. She's still alive, and if she hears this, she'll probably be heartbroken by it. But, we have no relationship. I have sort of broken my relationship with anyone that has negative influences to my life, because it brought me down on my first rag to riches story. My success in my life was my failure in my previous life, but it was also my chain, or my kryptonite around my neck. It was a horrible thing. I was psychologically bad and poor because of it. So we left because my friend who lived on the estate with us, he was an Irish family as well. The father was the caretaker of the estate. His son and my friend, who played in the park with me and with the other guys, he was thrown out of the 12th floor to land to his death in front of me. And as a child, I witnessed horrific murder as a child. And that was a really hard thing. And then being pressed by the police to find out why that had happened, and did I see anything, and witness it, going through the trauma and being questioned by the police several times. Moreover, to find trouble in myself as well, because I wasn't led by my father, by a father figure. My mother really had no time to bring discipline to me. And when the discipline occurred, it was for the wrong reasons, because she was angry. Then I was beaten because she was angry. She was angry at the world, and we were the ones that got hit as a consequence. I mean, I was hit to the point where sometimes I bled. My mother hit me that hard at times, where she didn't know her own strength, and she beat me bloody. Yeah. So nowadays, if that happened, of course, I would be in a care home. But back then, nobody cared. The government never gave a shit about people like ourselves. And sometimes I wished I was in care, because the house that I lived in and the environment I lived in was actually open to a lot of harassment. Now, my mother had quite a bad time finding love, is what I would call it. And there was a new dad. It was horrific. I was kind of dependent on them. I remember one of the dads who came, he was going out with my mum for about 2 or 3 months, and he bought this car, a Hillman Imp, for mum to learn. She was never going to get a license, but he bought a car for her anyway. And he used to be a coach driver, and he used to bring cups of money from his tips as a coach driver and hand it to us as children, Joanne, John, and myself. It was amazing. And we were like, oh my goodness, we're getting money. And we used to go down to the shop and buy things like stupid straws that you drunk your water out of. It was a funny time. Mum went through major ups and downs of partying every week. We used to have parties in the house. She used to be known as Big Jenny the DJ, or BJ the DJ. And a lot of people think that was Blowjob the DJ. But she was really good at music, Mum. But the problem was with Mum, she brought a lot of unwanted attraction to it. So again, I was involved by babysitters who had, they were young teenage girls who I helped myself to their boobs, I helped myself to their bodies at the age of 6 and 7. Knew how to take a bra of a girl at the age of 7. So it's not really much of a good upbringing. If I brought my children like that, I would know they would be absolutely, unfit for the modern world. But that was my life. There was other things that went on, such as hard one to talk about, sharing it with the open public. I was sexually abused as a kid, and so the guy who abused me used to block me in the elevators. We used to take the elevator up to number 7 floor, and by that time he had, stuck his penis in my mouth and, spunked over me, which was hard to accept as a little blonde 7-year-old kid. When I can find, you can understand, I never found any security in life, so I found security in making money. This is how I adapted as a kid. survival of the fittest. How do you get your mind past it? You could never get your mind past it. I buried it. It was, to a certain degree, it was ground down as a human being. The life of me was not something I talked about in my teens, and it was something that never revealed its full face until I was in my 20s. But it all came to revelation when I started becoming stronger as a human being. So when I was no longer weak, I felt that it was easier to reflect back on them years. And I found anger and frustration with the whole thing, that I wasn't protected by my father and I wasn't looked after by my mother. My mother was only interested in getting the brew, smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol at the weekends. You know, she was a clean mum, and she did feed us. We always had food, so I'm not going to say that I was starved. I was hardly starved. I was a fat kid, But saying that, the reason why I was a fat kid was because I got the good side. I learned how to, at school. So this guy used to chase me all the time. I learned to run. So this is how I grew to be Mr. Fixer, Mr. Repairman. I always adapted and grew my business, or grew myself, into a methodical approach of doing stuff, and to stop the pain of trauma of childhood. Childhood was bad. I mean, so I learned about sex. I learned about how to make money. I learned about violence, death, murder. I was lifted by the cops for setting fire to a Ford Cortina. So I learned how to be an arsonist. I learned how to smoke cigarettes. I learned how to, at the age of 7, 8, 9, when I was in their biker gang, I was their engineer for the biker gang. And things like that was just something a child shouldn't be conditioned to know as a child. And as a child, I knew it was wrong, but nobody told me it was right or wrong, or there's the guidance. So I was unguided. We stole from Tesco's. I stole chewing gum from Tesco's. And I used to then I used to buy the big packs, or buy them. I used to take the big packs and take them out and sell them separately to people. And I used to envy all the kids who used to have the Star Wars toys. I used to envy Christmas time when, my mother really, she never really focused on presents for me. She always focused on Joanne. And then she looked baby John. I was the one in the middle. So I had the middle child syndrome. And I always felt that I was the one that was never getting what I needed. And instead of crying, which I did cry a lot during my times of, I sadly suffered from childhood depression. And my mum didn't see it. And nobody gave a shit. The only one that ever saw it was, actually, I was telling you why I was so fat, was the dinner ladies in school. For some reason, the dinner ladies used to always give me seconds and thirds. So I never had to go home hungry. It was, and I mean, again, I say that my mum always fed me, but I was always fed even more at school. So I became a fat child, and I loved the dinner ladies. I fell in love with the dinner ladies. I became somehow affectionate towards the dinner ladies. And when I went to school in Northern Ireland, the same thing occurred. I started a relationship so I could get more food. It's crazy. That's the first time I thought about that. Anyway, so Mum took us away. It started getting really troublesome. There was a lot of arrests. There was a lot of police coming into the area. And people were getting lined up and arrested against the walls, hands against the walls. Everyone was being searched. It was, a massive gangland area, skinheads, mods, and they were just knocking the crap out of each other, creating riots, fights, rows. It was a horrible time to live there. And Mum said, look, that's it. I've had enough. I'm leaving. So she went back to her homeland, which is here in Northern Ireland. She was born in County Fermanagh, Northern Ireland. And, I think what she did, I sometimes regret it because I lost my school. I was about to go and I thought I was smart enough to go into a grammar school. But sadly, my mother brought me here, and immediately they set me down to a thing called the 11 plus. So I had no revision, and they immediately put me into the dunce class because of my 11 plus failure. I had no idea. So why we came here was because where we lived was an absolute dive, and Mum felt it was best to get family support to live in Irvinstown again. So she made that decision and came home, and took us with her. There we go.
So one thing before we move away from the London things, why was your friend free out of the stone? Why was he murdered? Was this just a random gang attack? Was this just some nonsense?
We don't know.
Don't know.
We don't know to this very day.
Yeah.
All we know is that child suffered for 20 minutes on his own, holding my hand, before the ambulance came. 20 minutes.
And then in terms of the abuse, was there one abuser? Was that it, or was there?
No, so this one, there was one abuser. So
He was never caught.
never caught. Yeah, no. Yeah, because they didn't. The police never seemed to care when I came out. When I came out, it's like saying, because you know you look aghast. It is known as coming out.
Oh yeah, it's like to showcase your like trauma and stuff. It was coming out. So.
Correct. I came out at 23 when I was, in a secure relationship with my former wife. So I came out and I went to the police because I explained it to her. That's who I told it to. The first person I trusted in my life was my ex-wife. Sadly, matriarchal abuse, I call it. But again, you talk about the abuse thing. It wasn't so much when I look at it. I've got this slight. Is it, what do you call that? Is it Hanover? Where's that German city?
Hanover?
No, is it Hanover syndrome? No, it's not Hanover. Berlin syndrome. Munich syndrome. That's Munich syndrome. No, so Munich syndrome, where you kind of identified and empathized with the abuser. And I started thinking to myself, well, you know what? I'm actually alive. I'm glad he didn't kill me. Because so many other kids were murdered, so they kept silent. So I was sort of glad that I wasn't killed.
Is it Berlin syndrome?
Berlin syndrome, is it?
I think so.
Well, one of them syndromes, I know what it is, viewers, so... this is a guy who studied 6 years of psychology, but it's just my mind, not one of them syndromes that where you empathize. But what I did detest was the day that I was given sweets, and when I first learnt of this abuse, when I was in on the abuse, I went crying, knocking to the door with a bag of sweets in my hand. I remember these sweets. And they were known as Roundtree. Oh, crikey, I can't remember the name now. No, they were black, or they were square, and they were crunchy and chewy. But they used to be known as Macintosh back in the days, but now Roundtree on them. And they come in a wee white bag, plastic bag, and they were crunchy and chewy and fruity. Again, I can't remember the name of them. I don't know why I'm not remembering these things. Maybe I've got it out of my mind. So he gave me these sweets and I was crying. I was in tears, and I remember the desire looking up at my mum, the desire to go, Mum, what's happened here? Speechless, in tears. And she goes, where the did you get them sweets? And I couldn't talk to her. I couldn't tell her because I was trying to, as a young adolescent, trying to work out what actually happened. I had a penis in my mouth there. He had white stuff coming out of his penis. I saw a massive man's penis. And, in comparison to me as a kid, it was scary. It was one of the most fearful things ever. I froze, and I was still in zombie mode. And my mum beat me for having them sweets in my hand. I remember that day I crawled behind the sofa for security, and I never came out for years. And if I did come out, I went into the bike shed where I was secure in four walls. My mum hadn't a clue. So the abuser wasn't actually just the sexual abuse. It was the matriarchal abuse that I got for being sexually abused. And that was one of the hardest things to come to revelation.
Yeah. So
She never knew. And when I told it to her and said, Mum, Oh, she knows now, but she went, oh, I knew. No,
Your mom thing to say as well.
no, you didn't. You didn't know. You did not know. You did not know.
You still hold a grudge against her over that?
Oh, I told her. I have no love for her. We had a meet-up recently because it was about her grandchildren, my children, having a relationship with their grandmother. And I'm very keen to make sure that my mother knows my kids. But it's up to her what she does and how she shows her reputation. But as far as I'm concerned, we do not have a relationship. Not just on that. Not just on that. I remember, being beat blindly because my elder sister, Joanne, had smashed up one of my toys that my dad bought me before he left, an Action Man helicopter. She smashed it out of jealous rage. Maybe because she didn't have a father. So she smashed it up and then blamed me for smashing it up. And my mum beat me blind without even asking who did this. I felt at a very early age I was older than her. I think I was 9 when I realised I was smarter than her.
Was it just alcohol at play, or was it drugs?
No, there was no alcohol. Well, I don't know. I mean, I remember Mum drinking. Did she take drugs? I don't know. I don't care. It was the fact that, we had... I mean, all of the things as a child I was absolutely witness to. My mum having... going to a bed. So we had a 2-bedroom flat on the 7th floor. And of course, what did we have to do? We had to have a bed in the living room. And it was Mum's bed in the living room so she could watch TV. It was really common sense. So Joanne had her own room, and me and John had the one at the far left, which was facing the world, including aircraft going past. It was... If you remember Del Boy, the house he lived in, it's very similar to that. Block of flats up on the top floor, and you could hear the plane coming through. And we lived beside Heathrow Airport. So the planes used to come in, we could sit out in the veranda spitting on people, and you're laughing, but that's what we did. We used to do spitting competitions, how much a spit would go down. And it used to land on other people's balconies. It's disgusting, but anyway. Anyway, so... where was I on that? So my mum, I used to go in sometimes, and my mum used to have another man in the bed. And it was just a different man. I remember one time I walked in, I heard a lot of banging, and I was woken by the banging. And I walked in, and my mum was having sex with some guy, and she goes, oh, don't worry about him, he's sleepwalking. And I lied because she told me I was sleepwalking. I went like this here, and went back to my bed. Absolutely traumatized by the fact that someone was smashing my mum. And all I remember is taking what I now know is a hard-on piss in the toilet, and I could hear it. And I was like, jealous, rage, as a child, doing that to my mum. Didn't know my mum was happy to allow that to happen to her, but this is the world that I lived in. It was an awakening at such an early age, and that had an effect on my first rags to riches story. That was the reason why I grew to become very successful. And also the reason why I failed so successfully too.
So we'll jump back to Northern Ireland. So whenever you moved here was probably the height of the Troubles. The Troubles were brewing.
Yeah.
You have an English accent.
Right.
How did that work?
So, we came to Northern Ireland. So again, my mother decided to get everything packed up. Got rid of my cat, to which I had a lot of love for, Pernod. Again, I didn't know Pernod was a drink at the time, but Pernod was a drink at the time. And I thought it was Pernod, Why don't you call it Pernod? And it was one of the, Pernod, as a child trying to, and Pernod became my cat. Didn't realize it was an alcohol. So we came to Northern Ireland with nothing, just suitcases. Everything I owned, everything I had, including my granddad's blanket and gifts that was given to me by my father and the bike shed, it was all just abandoned. And I mean abandoned. Mum packed these things in boxes but didn't pay the freight company to get them delivered, so they never arrived. And she was trying to pay them but lying to us about, and I was like, when's my stuff coming? I lost everything. I had everything I had in England was gone. All I had was a suitcase of clothes. And we arrived in Northern Ireland. I was 11, 12, and a horrible time.
What year?
So that would have been 1983, 1984, the 80s.
Do you remember kind of your first reaction to what's going on here, kind of in Northern Ireland, the troubles brewing?
So we ended up going into a council house with our uncle. So he had a council house. Our uncle had a council house in Northern Ireland, and we stayed in one room. And it was the smallest room. We all had to budge in there, three of us, plus mum, had to budge into that small room. Sometimes we shared it with our cousins, but, you know, it was a 3-bedroom house. Uncle Tony, Auntie Sharon, his kids lying on the floors, and then us, temporarily. My mum's brother, yeah. And he was a good guy. He was he's dead now, sadly. But he was a good guy. I liked Uncle Tony. He was a gentleman.
And what about school in Northern Ireland? You kind of coming in there, everyone's thinking, who's this?
So we didn't go to school. We didn't go to school first. So when we arrived, it was a summer. It was a summer. That's why I say 11, 12. It was a summer. And what happened was we moved into Sally's Wood in Irvinstown. But then Mum managed to get, after about 2 months, managed to get a house for us. And we had just started going to school. It was in a place called Bridge Street. It had no carpets on the floor. We had no furniture. We had no cooker. We had no fridge. We basically just had a fire, blankets and clothes on a wooden floor. And I remember moving into it and us lying on blankets and sleeping all in the living room because it was too cold for the rest of the property. That was only fire heated, never had gas or oil, modern heating. It was just coal, fire, and an immersion heater, and that was it. But when we moved into it, I remember it was getting into the late season, so it was September, October, November time. It was starting to get cold, and you felt it. You felt the dark, and you felt how bad it was. And I took a fever. I actually took a fever. And I don't remember 6 months of my life because I was more or less in bed continuously with a fever. Never forced to go to school. So my first year in primary school, it was not in primary school. I only attended so much in primary school. But I took that fever and I don't know what happened to me. Mum said it was homesickness. It probably was. Even though I didn't see my dad, I missed my dad. I was away from my father. I knew my father was only in Oxfordshire while I was in London. I knew, he never wanted to come anywhere near me because his bitch of a wife never wanted me to. She never wanted a relationship with my mum, so she forced. Dad's a soft one. Like he wouldn't have had a relationship with me anyway. It was me constantly reached out to him for a relationship, you know. So I always used to do all the work, and Dad used to always react. But anyway, so we came to Northern Ireland. We went to school. So Mum thought she'd teach us manners, and put us into a Catholic school. And that was the worst thing that ever happened to me as well.
Was it like nuns, etc.?
Priests. And I was called Brit. That was my nickname, Brit. Bullied in school from an early age. Bullied by everybody. Even the softies bullied me. I think I was a bit of a fool. But I had no guidance. I had no fatherly guidance to stand up for myself. So it wasn't a good time. The years in Irvinstown was not a good time. The sooner I got out of Irvinstown, the better. So this is where I learnt my skill set, and I homed in on my skill set of making money. So, you know, as soon as we kind of established ourselves at the age of 13, I started cutting grass. I talk about this in my videos about how you can make money from nothing by simply just washing cars, knock doors and wash cars. That's what I did. 13 years of age. We had no money again, so we moved to another house from Bridge Street. We moved back up to Sally's Wood where my uncle lived, and we kind of settled in. We had a nicer bedroom. It was a bit better house. It was a bigger house, not much bigger for a council house, but it was a bigger as far as I was concerned. It was like the Beverly Hills at the time, you know. No carpet still, or telephone. We had none of that. No car, or anything like that. And food was just normal food that you would have got, like the white brand stuff that you get, like the value Tesco stuff. It wasn't Tesco because there wasn't a Tesco in Irvinstown, but it was value stuff. We didn't have Tesco. We had the Northern Irish brands then. There wasn't such thing as Tesco, Sainsbury's or Iceland. None of that. It was Crazy Prices and Stewart's and somewhere else. Woolworths. Used to get the value food there. Value beans, value stuff, you know, and the cereal was terrible. It tasted like cardboard, you know. But anyway, I digress. So that's how I started learning to become an entrepreneur. Mum had no money, and the money she had to spend it on cigarettes. It was very important that she kept her addiction going. As a child at the age of 12, I thought, Mum, why don't you just stop smoking? Or stop going out at the weekends? Why don't you just go and get a part-time job? That stuff you couldn't have said. It would have upset her. You're always fearful of always making her cry. You know, if you said something, you know, as I become older, I became more objectional. I was like, you know, I object to this. Why is this happening? Why are you doing? So I became at an early age very objectional to Mum's parenting and her skill set on it. And I used to see so many flaws in my mother. Now again, you know, I can't blame my mother for being who she is. She is who she is. She didn't have a very good upbringing herself, I think. But ultimately, she didn't have the knowledge or the understanding or the awareness to put something good in us. Again, the house was always clean. We were always fed. You know, it was always done. We never went without. We didn't have the posh stuff or like sweets, and I didn't have, you know, tuck shop money, or I didn't, you know, we had to get free meal tickets. And we had to stand in the line. It was so embarrassing because the school, you know, had no sense. They had no sense to traumatize children even more, telling everyone else they're poor. When the rich kids came in with their packed lunch, and we had to stand in a queue on the entrance of the school and line up for our free meal tickets every morning. That was just a disgrace. You know, it wasn't handed to you with you know, humility. It was given to you, there's a poor child. Here you go, poor child. You know, it was never done with and that was embarrassing for me. And I always wished that I could just go in and hand them cash for my food. So I did it. And that's how I started doing it. I used to go and I went and borrowed my grand auntie's ladder. It was heavy. It was made of wood. I was 13, 14. So I wasn't a strong guy. I wasn't built. I wasn't a strong lad. But I went and borrowed ferry washing up liquid, a bucket and a sponge and cloths. And I went round and I started knocking on doors with this big heavy ladder made of wood, splinters in my hands, as I learned to carry, you know, a really heavy, and when it was wet, it was even heavier. So it was exhausting to put these ladders up without breaking the window. And the whole lessons of cleaning windows throughout Irvinstown and then having 2 or 3 jobs, not studying, not doing my homework, but actually going out and earning money. So I ended up working also in a hardware shop where I used to push Calor gas around in Irvinstown, up the hills on a wheelbarrow, heavy Calor Consen gas barrels, sometimes 3 at a go, up a thing to get a tip of 10 pence or 20 pence. That was a lot of money back then for me. I used to go home with jingle jangles in my pockets, and any day that I wasn't working for Dickie's Hardware, I was out washing windows, cutting grass, and I was cutting grass with a scythe or a pair of clippers. I wasn't doing it with a machine. I was doing it with clippers or a scythe, and I tried my best to do something for someone for money, knocking on doors. I ended up washing cars and washing windows because it was the easiest to get. You got free water off the customer. and all you did was you had a wee bit of soap, and you went and bought for 40p or 30p. It was probably less than, actually, 20 pence, a bit of fairy washing up liquid. You put it in there, you mix it up, and you wash the car with a sponge. Same sponge that you dropped on the floor to put scratches on the cars. But anyway, I did it, and I made a lot of money from it. And I even had the balls to go knock on the hotel door and say, can I wash your windows? To be refused. And then be told, oh, listen, go wash them windows on the property they bought. And he told me, go and wash them windows. And he gave me £1 for spending the whole day washing the windows, part of his punch, to do it for him. It was Joe Mahan back in the old days. And I mean, you know, it was just being able to do that and earn a bit of money. Even though I could have done it, I could have done maybe 6, 7 houses for £1.40, £1.60. In the same day that I'd done the windows, I just thought, I just washed Mahan's Hotel's windows. But that was it. That's how I made money. I made money by doing it myself. And that's when I could go and thumb a lift, because we had to walk to Enniskillen, to Woolworths. We didn't have a car, so we had to thumb lifts. And 9 miles, 10 miles away from the house to go and buy stuff. So I went and bought myself a proper school bag, because I was always being slagged off at school for being poor and having a poor bag. Mum used to go to this place, a little hardware shop that sold like these army canvas bags. And no matter how much I put marker felt tip on them, we were being slagged off for having the poor person's bag. Because that's what poor people carried, the J. O'Hanlon army bags. And they were just made of canvas. They were cheap as... And we used to wear poor shoes, where everyone had, you know, maybe, we all had to wear black shoes, but everyone had nice shoes. And we didn't. We had the bargain shoes from the bargain thing, sometimes too big for us.
So by this stage in your life, were you more so, you're talking about washing your windows, you like cleaning cars, doing stuff yourself, even fixing bikes in the early days, were you starting to think, I can just make money myself without following the systematic way of going through schools, through higher education, through this to find a career?
No.
Were you just thinking, I can make money?
No, it was a bit dumber than that, a bit more stupid. There was no intellect. Mm-hmm. It was, I have a need, I can't get the need on my natural resources that I have, and I have to then earn that need. And I felt at an early age, when I was back in England, when I could do bikes and earn money from it, that by begging, borrowing or stealing, I made money. So it was more or less the desire to get stuff, and how to get it was to earn it honestly. So as you felt, as you asked the question, it wasn't intellectual, it wasn't thought through. All I done was I had a need and I just went and done it. That was it. So school was never of interest to me, purely because I was bullied in school. I was oppressed by the priests, and I was looked down upon by the teachers. The teachers didn't have any respect for me or cared or concerned. There were 2 of them that were extremely lovable teachers. He was my art teacher, Mr. Quigley. And if you're alive, Mr. Quigley, I'll thank you for a lot of it. But the guy homed me. He sat down beside me and showed me stuff, and I became so good at drawing and art. It was because I looked up to him as a father figure. Saying that in my 14 and 15 years of age, before I left Irvinstown, my mother met another man, another one. And he was the friend of the man that she was going out with in Irvinstown. Paddy she was going out with, and his friend was called Sean. And Sean became the lover of my mum as well. And she got pregnant to him at an age of, when I was 15 I was, when she announced that she was pregnant with now my half brother Hugh, who works in the government. He's a good lad, nice guy. But Sean was actually an electrician, and he took me out one day to show me how to put an earth rod in. And at that point, I was smitten by how electrics work. And even though I was really into my art, and I But I was expelled for drawing pornography at the age of 15. And this is just a tree in the shape of a woman. And I refer to it as Mother Nature. That's what I called it, Mother Nature. So I drew this beautiful tree, like a big oak. You know, I was practicing branches. I was practicing how the bark was. And if you look and you familiarize yourself with some trees, sometimes you'll see like little shapes and faces in a tree. So I thought I would form it into a female, holding with her arms up. And I call it Mother Nature. That was known as pornography in that school. It was a Catholic school. And I just felt it wasn't anything other than just a sheer snobbery of the headmaster or headmistress, Mrs. Horish. She was just a snobby, horrible, snidey woman. I had no time for her. And she expelled me immediately. And who cared? Nobody gave a crap. Nobody cared about my education. Not the education system, not the Catholic diocese, not my mum, not my dad. He was busy making his own family in Oxfordshire. Nobody cared. All my mum said was, well, you need to move out. You need to move out of the house because you're now going to have to go and earn money. I didn't sit my exams because I couldn't. I was told that I was allowed to come back, but I had no education or guidance to do my GCSEs. And yeah, it was a hard time because my mother said, well, I'm not going to get the brew for you anymore. So you have to move out because I can't pay for you, which was a lie. All she wanted was another room for her newly born baby son, Hugh. I had to move out, 15 years of age, going on 16. And I had to go and live in a hotel and work full time as a 15-year-old. So,
did you afford the hotel?
No, I worked in the hotel. Oh. So they let me stay in the staff house with the barman and the receptionist and several cooks or chefs. That hotel I ended up owning, by the way.
Is that the one, is it?
That's the one, yeah.
So was it actually a bit of a pleasant experience living on this?
Well, we'll jump ahead on the hotel. We'll talk back about that. So, cut forward, I owned a hotel that I ended up staying in, but we'll stay on the time frame because that's way years ahead of this big, long and arduous story, viewers.